Yep.
You can, sorry. I was wondering about that when I left it there.
That's where you usually go, right?
Yep. And then if you click on this, then you can just go down. It's the same thing. It has
Oh,
every-
and then you click on
everything.
those and they come right up?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank
You'll end
you.
up with 100 tabs open by the end of the meeting, but
See, it wasn't just me
But it
tonight,
works.
guys.
Like my brain, there's a million tabs open.
Yeah, there's
no
like-
idea where the music's coming from. Okay. Logan, are we good to go?
Recording in progress.
All right, I will call this meeting of the Essex Town Select Board for Monday, March 17th to order. First item for discussion is agenda additions or changes. Is there anything from staff?
None from staff?
Anything from the board? Seeing no changes, there is no need to amend or change the agenda. At this point, we will move on to public to be heard. Public to be heard is a time for members of the public to address the select board, give input. We just ask that you raise your physical hand in the room. If you're on the room, you can raise your virtual hand by clicking, I believe, the more 3 dots. You'll have a reactions option, and you can raise your virtual hand that way. I will start us off this evening as also a member of the public, but to point out that it is Dawn Hill-Fleury's last select board meeting with us. So I would just like to thank Dawn for her service and appreciate the fact that she will likely still be involved
You're not getting rid of me, right?
with the Board of Civil Authority, the Board of Abatement, the Town Meeting TV, and also I know I'm missing one, the
Human
Human
Services.
Services
Yeah.
Funding Committee. So Dawn, thank you for your service.
You're welcome. Thank you all. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's been 5 years, never missed a meeting, and I've used 10 yellow pads, so we're good. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Dawn. And with that, I will turn it over to members in the room, members online. Again, you can raise your physical hand, you can raise your virtual hand. Come on up.
Well, my name is David Scopin, and I live on Skyline Drive. And at the Greg, at your encouragement, I'm here to kind of flesh out a little bit of the idea of having a climate change mitigation officer. Would you say that you kind of encouraged me?
I think you asked about an energy coordinator, and I suggested that you make some suggestions of what that might look like. Is that
And energy coordinator, I shy away from that sort of thing. I don't really know what in the world you would be coordinating energy-wise, but I do have a really good idea of climate change. And I learned from Greg that he was environmental studies. Was it environmental science? You have an undergraduate degree in that?
I have a minor in environmental.
You have a minor.
Yes.
Okay. So this is a man that he quickly corrected me. We didn't have to go into detail. He understood very clearly what I was talking about. Anyways, so what I would hope for would be a climate mitigation officer. And the reason for mitigation is that he or she would be someone who would involved with trying to decrease or reduce the severity, the seriousness or painfulness of something that could occur. And in case any of us haven't wondered about that, we're in for more pain in the future. But certainly, knowing where we're at and what we're up against, hopefully, will make us more capable of protecting ourselves. The reason I say officer is this is someone that's looking out for the welfare of the community, much like a ship captain. And the ship captain, as we know, can make certain recommendations or make certain things happen. Like turn the ship away from that obstruction that's sitting in the water. So I think it would be incredibly necessary for someone to have not only being able to make recommendations, but in sometimes use maybe a little more, use their position a little more actively. Now, the whole thing, to give you an idea of what I would be looking for, we would be looking for someone much like Greg, although this would be someone who had majored in the environmental sciences. And this is probably an undergraduate degree, and I couldn't promise that you would be able to pay their wage and find that you were suddenly in a wash of cash flowing in to the township or to the community. But I think not doing this or something similar to this is going to put you in harm's way, much like having a ship out on sea and you don't have a captain and you don't realize that you're about to hit something. Now, I'm assuming that anything that I would come up with would have to pass through the select board, have to be voted by the select board to go forward. Is that correct?
That would be my understanding if it's adding additional staff or if it's adding an additional volunteer position that...
If you were going to add staff, if you were going to add a specific type of staff, what I'm proposing here, this is something that you would have to vote on. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Depends how it's approached. If
yeah.
it's added through the budget, that's
It'd be
the likely
included in the
approach.
budget,
Yeah.
Gotcha.
If it's a shift of positions, it's a different conversation.
So right away, I'm wondering how much time and effort I want to put in going on talking about this topic, or going into more detail and doing more research so I can give you even more information. If I don't have any idea whether I would have anyone that would actually vote for this. And what I'm wondering is how in the world am I going to find out from you all what your attitude is towards this topic? Is anyone willing to admit to the fact that they're really concerned about climate change?
I'm not sure that...
Isn't the public allowed to find out
Yeah,
what
I
attitudes
don't
you
know
have?
how much detail we can go into, understanding that this isn't a topic that's warned on the agenda. We can certainly take in information,
Gotcha.
and if I can offer a suggestion without putting too much work into it, not knowing what that outcome would be, if you could provide sort of an outline or description details of what you're thinking, we could put it on a future agenda. We will also be, our reorganizational meeting is the first meeting in April.
I'm sorry, what kind of
Our reorganizational meeting, I'm sorry, is that better?
my hearing is...
So each year, the select board reorganizes. We, choose a chair, a vice chair, a clerk, and shortly thereafter, we also have a priority setting discussion about our upcoming work plan. So at that point, I suspect that this could be a topic for us to discuss around priorities for the coming year.
Very good. So what you're saying, if I could put it into my own words, is you're saying I should get something in writing to you, and then attend the meeting that you spoke of. Would that be a value, or would I simply put
that would
something
be
in writing and find out where it goes from there?
Yes, that would be my recommendation for how how to move forward.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
There's a note on the. Lorraine has her hand up.
Lorraine, you're online. You have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. I noted over the weekend that there is a proposal before our DRB to put in, by a local developer, to put in an Amazon, a rather large Amazon distribution center in RPDI, the Resource Preservation District. And I'm just wondering how, I'm trying to understand process, because it looked like there was a meeting at one point between town manager, community development director, and our recreation department head with the developer. And if they did meet, was that related to this proposal that's in front of the DRB? And if so, is it possible for the community to get notes from that meeting to understand what it was about? Thanks.
Hi, Lorraine. Yes, I've had a meeting with that landowner, developer, and staff. We've met on various topics over the years. I think the process is going to play out with the DRB and go through the current or the proper review process there. It's pretty common for developers to meet with staff ahead of time to understand regulations. As far as a specific meeting, if you want to reach out to me tomorrow, we can probably find a way to touch base and figure out exactly which records you might be looking for.
Okay, I appreciate that. Just because, of course, as we all know, RPDI and Saxon Hill has been a rather large bone of contention in terms of people understanding what RPDI means, and that one of the regulations is in keeping with harmony with nature, and it just seems to keep getting run roughshod over. So coming on the heels of what David's saying, I think it is critical that we have climate change mitigation oversight over our planning and our regulations, especially given where those things are located. I'm in distribution, and one of my major concerns about distribution and resiliency through climate change is, again, we're seeing that North Williston Road and 117 was closed, and also up on Route 128 was closed down today as the river crested again. And my concern is that we're not coordinating all the committees and commissions and end up wasting a lot of time, especially even for the developers and costs for the developers, when really the regs should be held pretty strongly going, in the 21st century. So I'm also wondering about the people on DRB, whether they got onboarded in terms of understanding what RPDI is and what the regulations were and the history of that when the new developer purchased that land in 2007. It just seems like that very first meeting, it seemed like a number of the new members weren't necessarily aware of what the zoning was or what the zoning means. So that's the other part of this discussion, is onboarding and policy and education. Thanks.
Thanks, Lorraine. Any other comments for public to be heard? Okay, seeing none, I just wanted to make sure that we were over our warning start time for the public hearing. So at this point, I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing on the proposed Code of Ethics, Investigation and Enforcement Ordinance, Title 1, Chapter 1, Subchapter 05.
So moved.
Thank you. Don, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Ethan, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. The public hearing on the proposed Code of Ethics, Investigation and Enforcement Ordinance is now open. For a little bit of background on this, the state recently enacted a change that requires municipalities to have a Code of Ethics investigation process and an enforcement ordinance. So that is what we are discussing here this evening. If any members of the public want to come forward and speak to that, you are welcome to. And Greg, did you have any additional information on that?
No, we made one small change that we talked about last time. It was basically Karen, as the deputy manager, is our ethics liaison officer. So she will accept all of the complaints unless there's one about her. We forgot to specify that would go to the manager. So I believe that's the one change since the last time we saw this.
The only other change is that we reverted back to the language in the charter, which allows ordinances to become effective immediately. Prior to that, we had incorporated VLCT's model language of a 60-day window. So we eliminated that, and it will be effective immediately if it's adopted tonight.
Okay. Any comments in the room? Ken, come on up.
Were you gonna double team or not?
Can I come up as well? Sure.
We sort of organized together. Hello, I am Ken Signorello.
Irene Runner.
Two technical issues that I noticed, actually maybe three. In the ordinance, I finally got a chance to look at this. I apologize for not getting it at the first hearing. 1.05.030 references the act that established the Code of Ethics. It should actually be VSA 24, Chapter 60. Secondly, down in, I got to get this right, 1.05.050, B references Section 5A. Well, there is no Section 5A that I could find anyway. I think it's referring to 1.05.050A. So that reference probably should be specific so that it's clear what it's talking about. And
Where was that, Ken? I'm sorry. Would you just
I'll get you. 1.05050
The enforcement section.
B, which is entitled Enforcement Against Appointed Officers. And it references a Section 5A.
Got it. Thank you.
And I think I know what that's referring to, but it's not clear and not specific. It probably should be changed. The third thing is I noticed that almost the entire ordinance is lifted from Chapter 60 VSA 24. And in Chapter 60 VSA 24, it says there's only one component that actually needs to be done by ordinance. That is the procedure for filing a complaint. So I just wonder if it's wise to repeat everything that's in this statute when the statute could change and the ordinance not. So it seems to me that a perfect example is the list of municipal officers. That's exactly word for word from the statute. Now, what happens if they add a new officer to the list in the statute? So I would suggest that maybe the ordinance could be trimmed down to just that one section that's required according to the statute. I think that probably maybe, yeah, that. And the final thing is not related technical thing. I looked through the prohibited actions, I think it's entitled, prohibited conduct, which is subsection 1993, prohibited conduct. And some of you may or may not remember, but there was an incident a while ago where a public official went to quite length to call out a video that Irene and I had done on Town Meeting TV, and said some things that were later to be proven to be not true in Front Porch Forum and so on. And I asked for a retraction of that in the same media, and that was not done and denied. I wonder if it's any member of the select board's expectation that that sort of conduct would be a prohibited conduct. I looked over the prohibited conducts. I'm not sure if you guys have. I was not sure. It seemed like it should be logically, but to be called out publicly, to have lied to the public, and then have a finance director say, yeah, no, not true, and the person saying, yeah, I was wrong, and then not correcting the record in the same way that the offense was done, I think that would be an ethical violation, but that's just me. I wonder what you think. And if it's not something that is clear in the statute, maybe that's something that could be talked to our representatives about to make another amendment down the road to add some specific conduct that we are fully aware of. And with that, I'll turn it over to Irene.
Thank you. I'll start with the language in the ordinance, if I may, as Ken did, on section 105050, enforcement, section A, number 3 has some very strange spacing. I would hope that that could be corrected before
Wait,
it's published.
what portion are you at?
The enforcement portion. It says page 8 of the packet, the page that I'm looking at.
Is that 1.05.050?
It is. Mm-hmm.
And where is
A3, the enforcement against elected officers page.
A3? Oh, okay.
3 has really icky spacing, and it just looks so unprofessional. I'm surprised it wasn't caught sooner. In section B, it talks about the legislative body may choose to remove appointed municipal officers from office. I'll reference a different example. We had 3 select board members texting derogatory, vulgar language during the course of a select board meeting about members of the audience, including a former House rep. And I'm very concerned that there are not enough safeguards in this language for prohibiting municipal officers themselves from behaving however they please and letting their peers off the hook. So I would ask that you look closely at this language to ensure that not just Karen, which I appreciate, you're out of the board as far as being the designated complaint recipient, but also when it comes to the punitive actions that may be taken, that we find a way to designate alternative judge and jury than just the select board itself, because I never want to see people in power having an advantage that they're above the law or above the ordinance. It happens way too often in our culture. And it happened several years ago, about the time that the incident Kevin is talking about. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be another prohibited action I would hope would be covered, but I read through the list of prohibited actions and, I'm not sure.
Yeah. I do think that, outside of this ordinance, that there would be, the recall of select board members that's now part of our charter. That could be a potential form of recourse that could be taken for an egregious action. Just something to think about as well, which takes it away from the select board, away from staff, and puts it back in the hands of the voters.
Yeah, the prohibited actions tend to be oriented towards financial gain or personal gain. They don't seem to really be oriented towards a slander of some sort. In this case, libel. It was in writing.
Andy?
We do have a communications policy, which we will be reviewing at our next meeting, which maybe that's the appropriate place to look for that.
Irene, go ahead.
Thank you. Do I recall that the recall petition requires 15% of the voters to sign it to get it on a ballot? I mean, to me, that's pushing the enforcement off onto the electorate, all of whom are busy with their own lives, and to have that be the remedy to me, I think is unfortunate. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. To your comment earlier, Ethan, I have too many tabs open now. Bringing it back to the Code of Ethics Investigation and Enforcement Ordinance, are there any other comments from members of the public for our public hearing?
Not mine.
Seeing none, I would entertain a
Madam
motion to
Chair, I
close
make the
it.
motion, we close the public hearing.
Thank you, Don. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ethan. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion carries 5-0. Our public hearing is now closed. We will discuss and consider approval under business item 7F. So at this point, moving along to consent.
Madam Chair, I make the motion, we approve the consent agenda as corrected, which was a lot of the minutes had to be fixed.
Okay. Thank you, Don. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ethan. There is no discussion under consent. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Consent passes 5-0, which brings us along to our first business item. Interview possible appointment of a volunteer to serve on the Housing Commission, Noah Detzer. I believe I've pronounced your last name correctly? Okay, come on up. And tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested.
Sure, thanks for making the time tonight. My name is Noah Detzer. I'm originally from Burlington, grew up in White River Junction, and then just bought a house in Essex last fall. I was a public school teacher in Vermont for about 6 years, ended up moving into state government, and I currently work as the communications manager for the Department of Emergency Preparedness, Rescue, and Injury Prevention. In being a new member of the Essex community, I felt like this was a really good opportunity to work with other folks to work to solve a problem that I saw as a pretty significant problem, not just in Essex, but around the state as a whole.
All right, I'll open it up for board questions.
I'll go first. I was gonna ask you a little bit of some more of your interest with the Housing Commission, and then just a little bit of your background with just public service.
Sure. Yeah. I think I got a Master of Policy Management degree from Georgetown University in 2023. Was really excited to come back to Vermont to start to put that degree to work. Essentially, I feel like there's a lot of different issues that I see facing Vermont and facing kind of the future of this state. I think we have an aging population. I think it would be really nice to bring younger folks, younger families into the state. And I felt that housing is probably the most significant issue facing Vermont as it stands. I've rented in Burlington, in South Burlington. I went through the process of trying to buy a house, which was not easy, but it certainly opened my eyes to just how difficult that process is, and it made me wonder how I could best be of service to the community in being a part of a community, or being a part of the board that, or the commission, excuse me, that would actually make those decisions and ideally work towards policy that would make housing more affordable, more available, and do the work, basically.
Thank you.
Other board questions.
I didn't know if he was done. I just want to make sure. I would like to know your definition of affordable housing.
Yeah, housing that is affordable to the community. So essentially, when younger families are eager to buy a house, that they are able to do so. I think it's a little bit of a nebulous definition, simply because the cost of living increases, because the affordability, the availability of housing stock kind of changes over time. But essentially, if someone who has a long-term position, basically in the state, who is a contributing member of the community, if they are able to buy housing, that to me is affordable housing.
And if you serve on a committee and you want something to happen and the rest of the committee does not agree with you, how do you negotiate your way through?
I think that's the beauty of municipal government, working to find a compromise. Essentially, I think coming in, looking at the available evidence, making data-driven solutions, understanding what we're seeing as the problems and what available data says are ways to correct or go about finding a solution to that problem. So I think I will come in, I will make decisions based on the available evidence, based on what we're kind of seeing and hearing from community members. Ultimately, if the decisions that the conclusions that I come to are not conclusions that other folks come to, then I'll go with the board. I mean, ultimately, the idea is to best represent the community, and I think ultimately this is a board of folks who are committed to solving this problem. And as much as I might believe my position might be right, if the board is opposed to that and we're working towards a solution, then I'll go with the board.
Thank you.
I was just curious if you might have an idea or two that you're bringing to the commission that you might share.
I think ultimately, I mean, I'm first and foremost eager to learn. I think I'm eager to bring my experience to the board, but I think hearing where folks stand on kind of the issue of how to bring more housing and what we can specifically do as a group to bring recommendations forward is something that I'm eager to do. Ultimately, I'm a new member to the community, but I would really like to learn, continue to talk to folks, and bring that to the commission.
Okay, thank you.
Noah, what does being a public servant mean to you?
I think it's about accountability to the public. I think it's about seeking out what the public thinks about issues, what their questions, concerns are, and effectively taking that information and bringing it forward to the board in an appropriate venue, and doing my best to make sure that folks that I speak to feel that they're being heard and feel that they're being represented on a board, even if they themselves are not sitting on that board.
Thank you.
And Noah, my only question is, do you have any questions for us?
No, not at this time.
Would we like to discuss an executive, or would someone care to make a motion?
I'm ready to make a motion right now if you would like. I make the motion that we appoint Noah Detzer to the Housing Committee for a term of 3 years and 3 months, because the one he's interviewing for expires in June 2025. So that he doesn't have to turn around and come back like other candidates have. That would be my motion.
Okay, thank you, Don. Is there a second? Thank you, Ethan. I sense a theme this evening.
Their last time.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion carries 5-0. Noah, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome to Essex also.
Yes. Our next item, considering acceptance of Stantec's Upper Main Street Planning Project Report for new municipal complex. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello.
So Chris and I are before you one more time. As you've seen us over the last few months, as we've come before you to talk about the Upper Main Street Planning Project, and had report-ins after all the public meetings that we've had. And that included one very recently, last month, where was the final report in from the January open house that we had, and then kind of a sneak peek at the project report for Upper Main Street. So the report has been finalized and it's in your packet. And at this point, we are asking that you accept that final report. And essentially, accepting that report will really help us move to the next phase, where we can actually dig in and start doing, looking for funding, or figuring out which phases to approach first, how to engage the public further. The report actually has a section that talks about implementation. So, that's what we're hoping for, accept the report so we can then go forward and start implementing the plan. Okay. Anything you want to add, Chris?
No, that was well said.
Sorry. Hi. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to any board members who have further questions, clarifications.
Well, we received an email about a lack of response to a question, so I have a concern there. Is the person that emailed us wanted to know why you have the roundabout at no, I did read it. Wow.
Second roundabout on Old
The
Stage.
second roundabout on Old Stage. Thank you. I knew I read it.
Yeah, that question actually has come up numerous times, so I feel like I have somewhat of an answer ready for you, because what the first off, the piece about the roundabout is something that the public kind of was drawn to, so we showed it. What hasn't happened yet, and this is part of the next phase that needs to happen, is a full-on traffic study to see if that's even warranted. What the second roundabout, where that came from was when we met with VTrans, which we had 2 or 3 meetings with them to discuss it, they basically said, yeah, you can't have full access into that entrance. And we said, what happens if we did a mini roundabout? And they said, oh yes, that would be one solution where you could do that. So to try to get full access, which means left in, left out, right in, right out, into that side of the site, the mini roundabout would require. They wouldn't allow like a four-way stop or just an entrance in and out of there because it would back up the intersection. So that's why it's shown, but also I don't, traffic study needs to happen before any of that. And the traffic study might come back with something else that V-Trans approves.
So that's true of the larger roundabout too, both.
Yeah,
of those.
so it's a good point. Any signal in that area, it's all kind of under that, what the traffic impact study recommends.
It's just we worked so hard to be open with the community, and it's like the person says he hadn't heard back from anybody, and I was a little concerned that. So with the approval of this, then when we approve the plan, then what's the next step? Where do we go from here, I guess?
There are a lot of different things that we can and need to do. So I think maybe to your point, we need to continue to engage with the public about the project and what we're looking to do next, or the many next steps that we're going to take. You'll see on your agenda there's a later item about accepting the Northern Borders grant for starting the infrastructure planning. So that is really an immediate next step that we can take. So we need to, with that, figure out the scope of that project. And I think for the whole site itself, we will need to figure out and discuss more funding options and opportunities. I think there really are a lot of different options for that we need to explore. But I will bring it back to wanting to continue to engage the public, engage the select board, the planning commission, really all our boards and committees. We're talking about housing earlier. There are some housing options potentially on the site. So working with the housing commission. So really just continuing what we started in the planning process. So we have a really good plan in front of us that is giving us direction on where to head. So it's not brainstorming anymore, but it's getting this stuff actually constructed through the engaging of the public and everybody.
Thank you.
Andy?
Yeah, there's an assessment in there of the value of the 4 future development lots. And I believe there's a phrase attached to that says with infrastructure in place. Is the implication there that the town would need to put the infrastructure in order to have that value, or is that value, there's 3 different, right? There's 3 different infrastructure phases. There's the blue, the orange, and the red.
Right. So the blue is really the first one that needs to go in, and so that would be the primary access to the site, and it would also get us over to where the municipal buildings are. Mm-hmm. That is something that we're looking for with the Northern Borders grant to help us with. So that will at least be water and sewer, but hopefully we're talking about stormwater and road as well with that grant. So that is something that the town would do. Any other parts of infrastructure going into the development parcels or back even to the recreation area could be put in, or we would expect would be put in by developers, whoever would be purchasing those parcels. So we would get the infrastructure to the site, but on our bigger parcel, but not a private developer would be responsible for bringing it further on to their
Okay, so the phrase that says with infrastructure in place is the blue phase.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, so it's not the entirety. Okay, great. Thank you.
And I should add, I think it's the red phase that goes back to the cyan phase, which is the recreation area.
Yeah, yep.
There could be, the town might want to put something in there in order to access the recreation area. Mm-hmm. But I don't think we would necessarily need water or sewer back there for the recreation area. So it could just be some sort of road or path back there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ethan, did you have questions?
Yeah, I got a couple. All right, so I'm gonna start with the cost estimates. I brought this up before. Reached out to a couple of different people, and my understanding from it all is that the valuation in the impact study fee was correct to the best of their ability, and the $40,000 that we paid for it. And my concern is that the blue phase is a road around the fire station, not included with the fire station. I understand it goes around it, but the fire station ultimately has access to Route 15. So the shortage in this estimate would be 2/3 of the blue phase associated with the fire station to get to $33 million, including geothermal wells in the fire study. So it just raises a little bit of concern to me with the numbers and the rest of it. And then to lead from that, the funding mechanisms, other than impact fees, the only funding mechanism that I see that stands out is rural development direct loans, which should be portrayed differently in here, that that's a consumer loan. That'll be a direct debt to the taxpayer. I think some of the way that it's listed under all the different categories with all these different options is pretty bold to use wording that makes it seem like there's an opportunity that's not a direct impact to the taxpayer. I'm concerned about the grant funding. The first step, and it's listed in this proposal, 1.37 million. Yes, there's opportunities for grants, reimbursement up to, not guaranteed to receive the full 500,000. You know, there's many steps that are being worded in a way to sell something rather than to explain to the purchaser what their monthly payment's going to be on the product that they're buying. The last thing that I wanted to thank you for was removing all the center curbs out of the fire station.
We heard that.
I did notice that. And the very last thing was going to be the next steps, implementation. So I think there's a very key step missing here, and this may not be on Stantec, this may be on us as a town, but I think there needs to be a line drawn somewhere where the town gets to say, are we interested in putting resources into this project? Yes or no? I don't think we go through the design. Now we're going to be looking at getting permitting, applying for potentially accepting grants to put us in a situation to accumulate debt without first asking the town as a whole if there's interest in this project. And those are my key points that I have. I have no issues with the report. I think it's very informative for all of us to understand the concept and the I don't know the right word for it, but the magnitude of what this truly is and potential benefits and potential costs. So those are my points.
Thank you, Ethan. Any other board questions, clarifications?
Ethan pretty much covered all the points. I mean, it's very important that before we embark on everything that we have a lot of public approval. There's been a number of large projects like this that have not passed. And I would just like to not go down that road and find out that we took the wrong road. So I was glad to hear that public involvement should be a big part of everything going forward.
Andy, questions?
I asked mine.
Okay. At this point, I will turn it over to public comment. If any members of the public have input on whether the select board should accept the Upper Main Street project report as it was included in the packet. Come on up.
My name's Robert LaLancette. I grew up here in the village, a couple streets over, and now live in Essex Center. And I do know this is just to approve the report, but I just have some general comments. I did go to one of the meetings at the coffee house, and time gets away from you and you can't be everywhere. I'm concerned about this because I punched in the basically what prompted me to get on the website for the town was the Essex Reporter, and I added things up, and I had to put a new calculator battery in and punch everything in again, and $88 million. And yes, I did see the assumptions of sales of existing buildings, an attempt to reduce costs, possible state fundings. But with the federal contracting everything, layoffs of some people that I know that work for the VA and immigration and IRS, it's a heavy burden, I think, for the taxpayers. And this all started, I believe, with moving this building into the town when the separation happened. And then it just seems like it cascaded with the library. Well, you're taking the library that's in walking distance from the schools and the developments over there to someplace you have to drive up here. Same thing with the firehouse. We're moving the firehouse up here to get to Vermont Coffee Roaster, when this Amazon distribution center with lithium batteries, paper products, household chemicals are going to be at. Seems like that's a major fire hazard down there, and the firehouse is right there. I did notice on page 66, there's these 5 things that we have to go through, and then the final one was after town approval, projects proceed. And I just wanted to know if that meant, are we going to have a town ballot to say, yes, we're going to do this? When I was a kid, I watched black and white TV, and Wizard of Oz was always on every year. And I said, oh, they ruined it when I finally got a color TV in like 1985. And somebody said, you dummy, it's reality hits, it's colorful, that's when the witch gets killed. And I'm like, oh, well, it seems as though this is kind of what's happening with this, but backwards. Because I want to see in black and white first what $88 million is going to be on my home, which, we're based on 2007 now with our appraisal on a $250,000 home that they used. So it would be nice to have that first to say, hey, this is going to cost you an extra $500 a year on your municipal tax for 30 years. It's just $88 million is tough to wrap my head around. If I can see it, and I know a lot of other people, if they can see it per year, hey, this is potentially what this is going to be, then possibly I may be persuaded to move in this direction. But right now, I just can't without knowing in black and white what the cost is going to be. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I may, I think that, now that we have a conceptual plan, assuming that we would accept the report based on public feedback, that is the next portion of the conversation, right, is what it would take to move forward with those conceptual plans that the public had input on. What are the funding mechanisms? What are the options that we could leverage for financing mechanisms? So, yes, and thank you for your comment. Come on up.
Hi, my name is Joe Bilodeau from Peacham Lane, and I appreciate you guys putting in all the hard work on this. I feel like I'm a little bit late to the game on understanding this new municipal project. I did see it in the Essex Reporter. Ethan, I appreciate your comments on costs, and Kendall as well. I do I come from a finance background. I'm a CPA, and conceptual plans, are great, but I do think that whenever requesting a project or something like that, cost guidelines should be given. When I look at 88 million, as previous gentleman just spoke of, and 2 roundabouts on Old Stage Road, which is in the direction of where I have to travel every day, it's concerning. And we talk a lot about affordable housing, and adding a gigantic chunk like this onto the municipal taxes, that's going to, go in the opposite direction of creating affordable housing in this community. So just thought I would make those comments, and I hope you really consider costs as a gigantic component of this project as you look at it and move forward. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any other comments in the room or online?
Madam Chair, there's a note that came up from someone named Jackie.
Deb Holland, I see that your hand is up.
She's on mute.
If you are speaking, you are on mute.
Oh, sorry. Okay, hi. Can I ask a question about one of the pages in the final report? Okay, on page 29, connectivity. What I'm seeing or seeming to understand is I'm seeing the fire truck access in red, and then vehicular access in blue. And I'm not seeing any vehicular access going in at the current light. Am I not seeing something?
Come back up. I have a feeling that the blue line is under the red line, but I'd like to verify that. So this would be the road across from Billy Butler.
Right, this is the new road. Yeah, and I'm not seeing any blue line like I am everywhere else in the picture sketch.
Is that the turn into Maple Fields though?
Yeah.
Maybe
Right.
because it's already an
So
existing road
that
though.
is the main entrance,
Yeah,
right?
it's the-
So
that is the main entrance for most people. So let me take a look at the drawing real quick and see if I can get on the same page. Is there a way to share it?
I'm trying not to yet.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm wondering if the line didn't get there because it's already an existing road. Because what you've drawn
There we
in
go.
are all existing roads. So.
Well,
Oh,
I was confused by that because I'm seeing the blue line on Route 15 and on Old Stage Road and Lost Nation, but I'm not seeing it at the Maple Fields entrance.
yeah. Now I understand. Yeah, Deb, you're spot on that the blue line would just be under that red line. The red would include both blue and red.
There should be, okay,
It's just because it's over the top of it.
okay, great. Okay, thank you for confirming that. I appreciate it.
Yep, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions either in the room or online?
Yes, there was someone named Jackie online.
Okay. Jackie, if you want to come off mute.
Hi, actually, my name's Jenna. I snagged my wife's computer, and I apologize if there's any background noise. It's bedtime in my house, so it's a little crazy. I think the other people who commented, the gentleman in the room, I had the same thing where I didn't even know this was happening, and maybe that's on me not engaging as well as I should in my town. But this feels like a very large project. And while I enjoy the idea of the center of town and having these buildings, what I also really question is the need for it to be on this scale. And I wonder, if this plan is adopted, is there still room down the road to scale things down if the community feels that that's appropriate? As an avid user of the library, which I love and support, the current proposed design feels very large compared to what I currently see our use as. And so I just wonder in that example, or like a 3-floor library or that large of a fire station, is that truly match what our current need is? Or is that, best case scenario, if we could afford whatever we wanted? I want to make sure it's really tapped into like, what is our reality? And again, kind of like the gentleman in the room that joined, I'm late to the party. I apologize if this is, not the right place to bring this feedback. I also wonder about maintenance. I did a quick look at the plan and I apologize if I missed it, but what is this going to cost us to maintain over the years, to staff over the years? So not just the initial building costs, but how are we going to maintain all of this? I would love to see those numbers and how it's going to impact each household. Seeing the 88 versus what it would cost me specifically would really help me feel more comfortable in moving forward with a plan of this magnitude. And I think, that was just my biggest comment, concern, kind of question. How locked in are we? Can we bring it down a little bit? And can we look at, does this make the most sense? And how it will impact us individually in costs. Also looking at those rec fields, I would love to see, and again, I apologize if I missed this, why do we need this many additional rec fields? Like between the tree farm, between the schools, between what we have, is our demand so significant that we need to add on this large of a project? Or again, is this just like our ideal if we could make it however we wanted? And I apologize, I'm not used to town engagement. This is new for me, but I appreciate being able to share those thoughts as just a resident. And again, someone who's also very overwhelmed with the number of projects that I'm seeing and the costs to us individually and what that would look like in order for me to stay here with my family.
Appreciate the question. And Catherine, do you want to speak to sort of the scalability of what's proposed or what's included in the report, the bits and pieces?
Sure. I think that is a pretty easy answer. So during the project, the Stantec architect spoke with staff about what the needs were. So looking at current needs as well as thinking a bit into the future about what needs we have. So you see that in the library, the municipal office, and the fire station. Through those conversations, the community center came out as an option. We don't really have any large spaces where we can, especially the recreation department, could have programming. So those all came out as ideas of what we wanted to see. I would say in particular with the library, and if you look at the report, you'll see already there's conversation about, this might not be exactly what we really want to see. This might be too big. So it's really meant as a starting point of here's, a bit like you said, here's really maybe the dream for especially I'd say the library, but reality might not match that. So there are definitely more conversations that need to be had. If you see with the library, they were suggesting maybe the 3rd floor be more of a mezzanine and that be non-programming space up there, so really be more of a 2-story library, but also thinking about the future. At some point we might want a bigger library, so making sure there's either room to expand within the footprint or adjacent. So a lot of those sorts of conversations still need to happen. I'd say that's true. I think the municipal office is actually pretty sized to what we would see the need to be. Fire station is really, we're looking at a 50-year building with the idea that there will be sometime in the future the need for full-time firefighters, so there will need to be room for firefighters to be there full-time overnight. But it is definitely a lot larger than what we have right now, and I think we need to have discussions about the sizing of that too. But again, making sure that we have enough room to expand in the future too. So if we do something smaller, make sure that we have room to expand down the road. So that really is a good starting point for us. Just to say, here's what we what we heard too from the public wanting to see, but we also have more conversations with the public to see what we can afford and what is really in the best interest of everybody.
Thanks, Catherine. And thank you for the comment, and welcome to a select board meeting. Ken, I saw your hand go up.
Thank you, Ken Signorello. I just want to say that I think Semtech has done a very good job of listening to the public, a lot of public outreach. I had a lot of conversations with these folks, and particularly spent a fair amount of time talking about the financing concerns, and you're hearing about those as well. So much so that they tried to draft me onto some sort of financing committee, and it's like the last thing I need right now is another committee to be on. But I just want to say that, let's say that this project is, slow walked, maybe until the current bond for the police station and the renovation of this building is paid off. Maybe even a little after that, maybe we save rather than borrow to finance this project. The Conservation and Trails Committee has had some discussions about this property, and in the event that there's a long delay like that, we're looking for a place to have a community farm, which is something that some towns have done, and this might be a good location for that while we're waiting and saving potentially. Thanks.
Thanks, Ken. Irene, come on up.
Hello again, Irene Renner. I was not planning to speak on this, but I did go to 2 of the workshops, and I thought they were well run. I will always be glad that we spend our ARPA money on real estate. It's a great investment and a hedge against future costs. I am also cognizant of the fact that the building that we are meeting in right now won't be paid off until 2035. We renovated it recently, and I think we did a great job. We have a huge vault. We have an excellent meeting room, and it's a far cry from what the building was like when I was on the select board. So I'm not in a hurry to move. I am okay with a new fire department, as constructing that maybe as step 1 and phasing these things in. But I'm also aware that the schools in our district have renovation costs right now somewhere around $1 billion. So while that may dwarf an $88 million construction expense, all that's coming out of the same taxpayer's wallet. And I think we need to be very conscious of how much we're asking people to stomach. Those renovations on the school side have nothing to do with keeping the schools open, the teachers employed, the buses running. So that doesn't even consider what's happening now at the federal level, but just on the local level, expenses are really hurting a lot of us. So I can't emphasize enough that phasing this in and doing as little as possible right now when there's so much uncertainty financially for all of us might be the best way to go. Thank you.
Thanks, Irene. Other public comment in the room or online? Will, come on up.
Hi, Will Dodge, Essex Energy Committee. Several of my members attended those workshops, and we thought that they were really great, and there were a lot of great ideas. I don't have strong disagreement with anything that anybody said, but I don't want the select board to lose sight of the opportunities that this represents to consolidate all those separate buildings that are now separately heated and have vehicles going back and forth between them all the time, separate electricity bills into a single place that could be built efficiently if done right, and in a way that really saves the town a lot of operating costs going forward. Because I don't think anybody should be under any illusions that our energy costs are going to stay the same. In fact, I think Greg's report recently pointed out what we could expect in terms of those costs going up. And so I realize that everyone is concerned about spending too much money. But for instance, the geothermal element that we looked at with the Vermont Thermal Networks looked like it could save a ton of money for the town in the long term. So just don't lose sight of the opportunity that this also represents for the town. Thanks.
Thanks, Will.
Can I ask him a question?
Will, are you up for a question?
Hi. I was just curious, because I'm actually interested. I just drilled a well and it's on my mind, but What is the return on a $425,000 geothermal well? What's the infrastructure?
So I
return?
haven't run the numbers, but basically what it was explained to us, if you just think about it conceptually,
Yep.
your energy costs are basically coming out of the ground that you own, right, and drastically reduced in comparison to buying it from elsewhere. So I think a lot of it is going to depend on how that building is built, but conceptually speaking, the interesting thing about a network is that you're basically designing a system for multiple buildings to be built and also buildings that exist already, like on the other side of Route 15. So the investment that's made would not necessarily just be for the town of Essex, but could be split with some of the existing tenants with buildings around that area, or also with developers who might be doing some of the affordable housing that's basically on the perimeter of where we're proposing to do the buildings. So in other words, it becomes, you create the potential for a public-private investment in a single network designed to ultimately save everybody operating costs over time.
Yeah.
But I don't have the specific numbers for you off the top of my head.
Okay.
I think that's something that Stanton is looking at.
The only reason I'm familiar with it at all is because we did some welding on a bunch of casing, but the Burlington project down there, there are over 30 wells.
Yeah.
To heat one building.
To heat one particular building, but I think, are you talking about the airport?
No, the big place downtown.
Because the airport, they're doing multiple buildings, is my understanding at Beta.
But I was under my impression that it was like 1,000 feet for a single family home. So I don't think that I think each one of these buildings has its own $425,000 built in for its own geothermal.
I think the idea, at least from the presentation that we had and is online, is that you can build a single field that supports multiple buildings. So you're reducing the cost in comparison to if you had to build a system for each and every building.
Okay, so you would add wells as you added the buildings, or there would be?
No, I think
that's different than this report. This report shows individual $425,000, so that would be totally separate from something that I've heard. That would be an upfront, let's just say $2.5 million to put in the geothermal.
Exactly, but it would be presumably less than that because it's not.
It's not in this report as that way.
Yeah, and I think the report is more conceptual, but as we, if this report is accepted and as we move forward, I think that those details will, we will need to dig into that level of detail, cost benefit, right sizing, how many.
I think that's important details that were left out of the report when the Energy Committee is dealing with Stantec, that wasn't portrayed in a manner of the public, that it was even an idea to make one field. I may be mistaken, but.
So, yeah, that did come up quite a bit, and the one thing that we did is we needed to conservatively assume that you weren't going to do this all at once. So when you're looking at those estimates, we're not, if you do them all at once, yes, it's going to be a heck of a lot cheaper. But that's not, there's a lot of complications with doing something like that. So when we put those estimates in for geothermal, when we talked to our estimator about it, we said, you got to look at these individual buildings. But Will's making a great point that there's things that can happen through this process that can help offset some of those costs depending on how this gets phased.
Right.
Yeah, and I guess our understanding was, yes, they were putting in those numbers now, but a lot of this, as you said, still needs to be socialized and looked at. And I guess conceptually, we love the idea of the bigger upfront costs in order to reduce the operating costs going forward, and also to create the potential to have private entities pay into this to also get some benefit.
Yeah.
Right, and I agree with that. I just think needs to be more research done that, again, I'm just from my own knowledge, my own opinion here, but, I've heard in tune of 15 years to return on investment on a geothermal system. So that's before you make any money back for the town taxpayer, and then you reduce the amount of cost savings with the electricity that's powering the 200 volt pumps that run the. So I just think that there's a lot of information that like you said, we need to look into it, but it's also, if we're having these conversations, I didn't read anything about that in this report. Just throwing that out there.
And you will see that, you know, getting to that level of detail does need to come at a later point, because we're not doing the mechanical engineering for this building, determining what size and how much it's going to cost. Like, that is a level of detail that's going to come next. And like you had mentioned, Tracy, like getting it, you know, right sizing everything, value of, you know, earned value of money, all of that stuff is going to have to get looked at for sure. But nothing we put in the report, which maybe, you know, we could have, but obviously we could have done a lot of things, and that was one thing that didn't get as much scrutiny as maybe the larger picture things did.
Right. And that's kind of the point of, you know, what I spoke to earlier with the cost, is that right in this report it says estimated accuracy ranges between 30% low or 50% high.
And that
$6 million is 30% low of $33 million for the fire station.
Yeah, spot on.
So it's on the very verge of the limits, and you got an 80% limit in the costing. You know, I understand it's just a general report, but you know, this is all the AACE cost estimating classification system.
Yeah, and it's based on the amount of detail you have at that time, and that's the amount of detail we have. And to get further, as you get further into detail, you're going to get better estimates, more accurate estimates.
So by voting to accept the plan, what are we committing the town to?
We are accepting the final deliverable from Stantec to say we accept that they have provided us this report as part of their contract. We're accepting that this is the conceptual plan. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we are not saying this is what it will cost. This is what we are doing. That will take future conversation, planning, prioritization, engagement with the public, cost benefit analysis, what makes sense to do, what phases when.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay.
If I could add just a little bit. Accepting the report, and Catherine laid it out pretty well earlier, it gives you, the board, it gives Stantec, it gives staff, it gives the public kind of the recognition that this is conceptually where we want to go. And okay, let's keep working on fleshing out that concept. Where's the infrastructure going to go? What's it going to cost? Once that's there, you know, what buildings do we want to build? In what order? With what sort of heating, energy type of infrastructure to support those? What lots do we want to sell? When do we want to sell them? At what cost? At what point? But it's really, I would focus on the concept piece of this. Of, you know, the buildings are there, the roads are there. The stuff associated with them, there's a green there, there's the park space in the back, there's the private lots that could be sold or subdivided. There's so many details to work out. But conceptually, that's where we're going to go, and we can start working out how to flesh out the plan to get there.
So basically, the cost right now is just accepting this and paying Stantec's final bill.
Yeah, if we
Correct?
paid it already, great.
Or paid.
Yeah, I think I just got the last.
I was gonna say, I'm just saying, that's all we're committing ourselves to by accepting this plan.
Correct.
No tax dollars money, because that's coming out of okay. I'm good.
All the next steps are going to require tax dollars.
Well, that'll be up to you guys.
Okay. and to note that there's no estimate in the next steps in this report either for how much it's planned to cost before the voters get a say on it. So that could be, you know, I know as we went through this, you know, this is $240,000, right?
About that. Yep. That all came out of ARPA.
Right.
Yeah, but we are getting to the point where there's going to have to be some taxpayer dollars spent. And I think accept this report, we can start talking about what that's going to look like. It's whoever mentioned it earlier tonight, I think Catherine, one of the items on your agenda is the Northern Borders Regional Commission Grant, which is some federal money to support this, but there's also going to be the local match and the local taxpayer dollars potentially going to support that infrastructure planning, the design piece of it. I think it's probably a safe bet to say that there will be a bond vote of some sort at some point. We're still in the designing, we're still in the planning stages. But I think when comes time to actually build, whether that's the roads or the buildings or the water sewer or all of the above, that's what's going to go to the voters. And there will be a more fleshed out plan as to how much money the bond is going to be, what that's going to do to the individual home or the average home in Essex, what other sources we have to support that money, support those costs. That will come. But yeah, I think that's when there's going to be the real voter input as to whether or not to go ahead with a bond or not. Or multiple bonds.
Or other
depending on the
financing
timing. Or other
mechanisms.
financing. Right.
Yep.
I would just add that, not to smack the dead spider again, but there's a lot of the buildings, like the Public Works building, the fire buildings, the library and everything that are really undersized and need a lot of work and expense now. So you're not going to escape costs going forward. So.
At this point, not seeing any other hands, not seeing any other discussion among the board, I would entertain a motion.
I make the motion to select board accept the final Upper Main Street project report, which will allow the town to move forward with further site planning, project phasing, and development, and would add future communications with the public.
Thank you. Dawn, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Andy? Any final discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1. Thank you for the work. And actually also for all of the input. I'm very happy with the amount of public input that we're receiving tonight, so thank you. Next on our agenda, consider approval of town manager's appointment of Susan Brown to the Cemetery Commission. I will just make a note that our charter amendments to move these to the select board has not received legislative and governor sign off at this point. So these are still manager appointments, which means that it is up to us to consider approval.
Correct. Susan is a longstanding member of the Cemetery Commission. She had said she might be here tonight, but I don't see her online. But I spoke to her last week. She's interested in continuing with the Cemetery Commission. She's been an active member. She's been the clerk for the commission for a while. She's interested in cemeteries and sees the importance of what they mean for the community. And she's been happy with some of the projects they've done as far as beautification and some of the other work. So she's looking to continue for another term, and I wholeheartedly recommend that she be reappointed.
I make the motion we appoint Susan Brown, yes, to another 3-year term on the Cemetery Commission to expire March 31st, 2028.
Thank you. Dawn, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Andy? All those in favor?
Just
go ahead.
Technically, we are approving the manager's appointment. Are we okay with the motion?
Right. What did I
don't know. I missed your words.
I just read what was in here. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Yes, sorry. That should say the Select Board recommends the Select Board approve the manager's appointment of Susan Brown.
So corrected.
Good.
Thank you. Yes, I'm
Okay.
good with that too.
All those in
Well,
favor? Go ahead.
I have a question.
Okay.
Well, it says on her application that you asked, do you live in the town of Essex? He says yes, but then it says she lives in Essex Junction. So is she an Essex Junction resident or an Essex Town resident?
She is an Essex Town resident.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Are we good?
We're good now.
Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries 5-0. Congratulations, Susan. Our next item is sort of the second half of the Upper Main Street planning. Consider acceptance of Northern Borders Regional Commission grant for infrastructure planning at the Upper Main Street Municipal Complex site. Welcome back.
Thank you. Like I've never left. I feel like I would like to share the table with Karen in particular with this. You'll see that she helped pen this memo. So I will start out. So as you've heard a couple different times, we've talked about the Northern Borders Regional Commission grant for infrastructure planning for Upper Main Street. And so we have a grant for up to $500,000 for infrastructure on this site. And essentially we're looking, as I spoke before, about the blue phase on the master plan. So that is the access to the site. The grant in particular right now is for water and sewer infrastructure planning. We're in conversation with the Northern Borders Regional Commission about expanding it to other infrastructure, so including stormwater and road infrastructure. And you'll see in the memo there's a range of funding or a range of funds that we would need to expend for this work. And it will depend somewhat on contingencies, and also will depend on if we're able to expand for the roadway and stormwater infrastructure. And in the memo, we're mentioning about potential funds that we could use for this. There's a match for the grant. So we have some water and sewer tasks, undesignated fund balance within this water and sewer enterprise fund, as well as some capital budget funds that we have for the municipal complex, as well as undesignated capital funds. We have approximately a year to figure out our funding, our match funding, and I think the hope would be to get it figured out sooner rather than later. So the recommendation is that the Select Board would accept the Northern Borders Regional Commission grant for Upper Main Street. And there's a requirement, we're noting for staff to return to you with a funding plan to identify the sources for the grant match prior for requesting the notice to proceed. Karen.
I think that was great, Catherine. A couple of things. Once we sign the grant agreement, we have 3 years to do the work. The first year, up to a year, you can take to identify your funding plan, clear any Environmental Policy Act hurdles, other kind of administrative ducks in a row, and then you can start on the work anytime you're ready to request a notice to proceed. So the way we've placed this in front of you is to understand conceptually you support us seeking these grant funds and work to identify exactly how we would provide a match to the grant. Come back to you before we would approach the funder requesting that sort of move to the second phase of actually doing the work. So we would make sure we understand clearly what tasks are eligible. We're seeking other grants for this work, and so having just a slightly clearer picture of exactly what funding sources we would want to recommend are approved to draw on to provide the match is what we would do in this first year, up to a year. I think we would probably do it sooner than that, but that's the requirement from the funder, that we be ready to start spending the money within a year.
John?
So my first question is, who or what is Northern Borders Regional Commission?
I can take a stab at that. I'm not sure that I'm the expert. So they provide funding for all sorts of economic development projects. They do it in Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, other New England states. I don't know if it goes, is it upper northern New York? And so folks are appointed, I believe appointed federally to be at least the chair of the commission. And they basically support economic development initiatives. I see in the list of award grants that are awarded, they have things like timber harvesting grants and other like economically development-based grants that support a wide range of projects. I'm not sure if Catherine, you want to add to that, or Greg, but
It's a federal program?
yes.
So these are federal grants that are currently being canceled all around the country. So there's no guarantee on this.
This one has not been canceled yet.
Yet. I'm just saying, there's no guarantee.
Correct.
That's my fear. You're telling us, oh, you're eligible and you've been to receive this grant, but tomorrow this grant could be canceled if we make a commitment.
Sure.
Ethan?
All right, so I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This is nothing personal against anybody. This is just my feelings on the topic. So the simple facts in this memo are that the grant is reimbursable up to $500,000. The up to is unclear for many reasons on what the qualifying or disqualifying events would be during the process. And the second piece of information here is that in order to receive $500,000, the town must spend $1 million liable for $500,000. There's a 30% contingency in there. The town will be liable for, it'd be $790,000. Secondly, in here, it lists ways of funding. The water sewer capital is a tax paid by water sewer users, not the entire town. Understandably, that the facilities would be on water sewer, so they would also be users, making town taxpayers essentially a member of water sewer as we are with this building. The next point I want to touch too is the capital. We just had a capital increase of 2 cents, and we took $210,000 from the operating budget transfer. And in this memo, we propose to spend all of the capital tax increase in 1 year on a project that hasn't been asked for by the voters.
So Ethan, I do want to clarify.
Yep.
Those are possible funding sources.
Possible, but by accepting...
This also has a requirement that staff return to the select board with a plan identifying, filling in those gaps and those details with an actual funding plan.
Correct.
But first, we would need to actually say, yes, we want the $500,000 to understand what those details would be.
Correct.
So I don't know whether that...
Yeah, that wasn't what I was saying. I'm saying if the select board approves this right now, you are, as a board, collectively saying the town is spending $1.49 million and we'll figure out how to pay for it, which pocket of money to take from. That's what this memo says. It doesn't say that we will not let staff go through with the grant. It says we will let staff return to us with where we're taking the money from. Once we line up with this grant, we have 3 years to start construction. I think finish construction.
This is just the design work. No construction is proposed at all.
So the design would have to be done in 3 years.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
So
the 50% match, should the full scope of work be deemed eligible, the net cost would be $690,000, not 1 point whatever million. The net cost would be $690,000.
how would it be $690,000? If you go with the 30% over your 1.49 million, you're only going to get $500,000 reimbursements.
So, if you would take
That's only 1.2.
1.2, 1.19 technically is what the estimate of the work is.
Okay.
There's a $300,000 contingency, which is how you get to the 1.49.
Right.
So hoping we don't need that, you're just looking at the gap between 500,000 and 1.19.
Right.
So that's around 600.
And that's why I said potentially, because
Sure.
I haven't seen a project come through that we paid $40,000 over for the last project that we just used to get estimates.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying here is in this memo, it says for remaining tasks, funding could come from various sources. These are sources staff listed out. From the town's municipal complex fund, from the capital budget, which has a balance of $126,496. Okay. Undesignated capital funds. That's our entire capital fund that has not been designated. If we need $500,000, we could take $500,000. But the point that I'm trying to reach here, besides all the small numbers that a lot of people probably didn't pay attention to, is if the select board passed this today They are signing up to spend your money without your say.
Andy?
So we have a year before we actually commit to this, right?
Yeah, so we have a year to do more due diligence, and then that's the timeline on which we'd have to request a notice to proceed, which is from our funders saying you can now spend money that can be reimbursed by the grant.
Right. So there's two things here, right? One is if we don't come up with an acceptable funding source for the match, we don't have to proceed with asking for the, I forget what the term is, the
Grant.
notice to proceed.
Right.
Right. So
we can indicate we don't want it.
If we approve this tonight, we have a year to back away from it. A year from, but I don't know which date.
Right. A year from this time of year, I would say.
Right. So the other thing that could happen between now and that year, while we're trying to figure out how to pay for, what we're considering how to pay for the match, is we could have a vote.
If you wanted to raise the match funds through voter approved debt, you could certainly find a time to have an election or a ballot item to get the public's opinion on that.
Or we could have a vote asking about the property in general.
Sure, of course.
So this is not the end of the road. This is not, I don't believe this is committing us to spend anything, because of the fact that we have to resolve how to fund it. We have a year to do that. And in that time, we can have a vote to get the vote to answer the question you've been raising all along.
It's not final until
None of
that
that's
notice.
in here.
It's not final until that
Well,
notice.
that's a different topic. This is just what we're asking staff to do here is figure out how to pay for the match, or come back with a proposal to pay for the match. That's what I see here. In parallel with that, we can certainly ask to have a vote.
So it'd be like the same vote that we used for the RFPs for the concept plan. Got it.
I just want to chime in a little bit about the vote. When Karen says it's around this time of year, we're trying to get clarity on, is it March
Right.
1st? Is it
I
April
know,
1st?
I know.
So I
It's-
just, for full disclosure, there may be time to do a vote at town meeting. There's certainly time for a special election if you want to go down that road. There's also, I would make the argument, we're still in the planning phase, and this is still planning. And how much information and how much legwork do you want to do before you take a vote to the voters, whether that's a bond for infrastructure construction, whether it's a bond for a municipal building construction of some sort. To me, to staff, as we talk about this is still the planning. And we've identified the funding sources. Those are the possible sources. We're not saying we're definitely going to take from this, or we're definitely going to take from that. That's what the comment in there about coming back to you with a more detailed plan before we get that notice to proceed. The capital plan runs through the select board, and so taking out of undesignated, that would go to the select board. Assigning future funds from that additional 2 cents, that would go back to the select board. So there's talk to, or options for, opportunities for you to take a look at this and say, do you want it to come out of capital? Is that a valid use of whether designated or undesignated capital to do more planning to take it to the bigger vote for the bigger project? But either way, I just wanted to be clear, there may or may not be time for a vote. There is definitely time to flesh out the funding sources and bring that back to you for notice to proceed, and then have a more informed discussion about, we'll have more information about the exact timing too. Is there time for a vote? Do you need to have a special vote if that's the road you want to take? Or do you want to make the decision as a select board, which is under your purview if you're taking it out of capital?
Okay. That's a good point. Thank you for.
Did I miss anything?
Kendall, you look like you have,
I got a few
you're
things to say about
percolating.
this. First of all, this grant is based on the conceptual plan that we just approved. And if that conceptual plan changes substantially in any way, they'll change their commission grant. You aren't obligated to spend the money by accepting the grant, and you have 3 years to spend it, but you're really kind of making a commitment to go for the project as the way that it has been conceptually designed without a whole lot of changes. So Ethan is correct in that if we approve this grant, we have a lot of opportunity to change it before we actually start spending any money. but you're really basing the grant on the project that you just conceptually approved. So I don't know if that helps make any clarity or not, but you know, at this point, really, we've been very clear about separating the cost for that project out of the budget. This is taking the step where you will start affecting the budget, and you really should start putting that out either in a special vote or something, because this is the first step. If we approve it, then we're going down that road. We're looking at that big project. And I just speak to this because the town of Richmond went through this trying to extend into the gateway with water and sewer stuff, and they got a grant. And they couldn't make the project work because of the cost and stuff, and they ended up giving the grant back. So you can do that, but it's really, it's the first step, so.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just one more thought or way to look at it. You've accepted the plan for the conceptual plan for the complex. At some point, you're going to want to do some planning. You're going to want to do some preparation and some studies. We as staff feel like there's an opportunity now to get up to $500,000, $500,000 to support that that planning. If you don't accept the grant, and we can table it, we can find ways to fund the study. But we really see this as an opportunity to get up to $500,000 to support the work that you've kind of, we're down that road. We've started that project. That's why we see it as an opportunity, and would recommend that you give us the option to accept the grant and get you some more information before we proceed further.
So, yeah, I would, talking ahead a little bit, don't necessarily have a problem accepting the grant, but just be aware that there's going to be a lot of discussion before we actually get to spending the money. So, because there's a lot of costs that are coming up into it. So, and right now the public sees that project as a $100 million project. So, we really got to do a lot of work to show the public that it's not going to cost you $100 million. So, my 2 cents.
Yes.
Do we have the start date on the grant for the requirement?
We have not executed a grant agreement yet, which would be the start date. We have heard from them that they would backdate it to the beginning of March, so we're asking for some clarity on that. But it's 3 years from the date that they signed the grant agreement from.
So the 1 year could be March 1st.
It could be, yes.
Of 26.
Just before
Yes.
town meeting, yeah.
I do believe, though, you have the opportunity that if you don't spend that, you can get an extension, and they're very good about giving
Yes.
a lot of extensions.
They did say we could request one extension.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'd like to open it to public comment. If there is any comment on the grant from Northern Borders.
Joe Bilodeau is a member of the public, and I appreciate the comments. And I do want to echo that I'm never one to turn down free money, per se. So it's great that they're pursuing some opportunities for, various grants. On the other hand, I appreciate Kendall's and Ethan's comments that you really are taking the first step down the path of this large project. And if you do indeed change it, a lot of the planning money will be wasted, having been down that road myself, a time or two. So that's all I wanted to echo, and appreciate the comments that you all make. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Big decision.
Seeing none, I'm going to bring it back to the board.
It's a big decision. The seat's hot tonight.
Andy?
Ready for a motion?
Yes.
I make a motion that the Select Board accept the Northern Borders Regional Commission grant for Upper Main Street with a requirement that staff return to the Select Board with a funding plan identifying sources of grant match prior to requesting a notice to proceed.
Thank you. Andy, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Ethan? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, nay?
Nay.
Nay.
Motion carries 3-2. So we will see funding options at a future meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, consider approval of request for proposals for solar photovoltaic system, Town of Essex land at 29 Indian Brook. Hello again.
Hello again. So Will Dodge, Chair of Essex Energy Committee. I'm not sure how you want to proceed, but this is a project that I think that we've spoken about before. And basically, in a nutshell, the idea is that this is a property that normally could not be developed for solar by virtue of a covenant. However, speaking with the original grantors who gave the land to the town, the way that the covenant is written is to suggest that if you could use the land or develop the land in a way that furthers the recreational purposes that were behind it, that solar development might be possible. So looking at it, there are parts of the property, I think it's 164 acres total. There's some areas of it that are just not developable, and that's because there's wetlands or there's sensitive areas. But there's somewhere in the vicinity of 30 acres that we believe could be developable, and we had at least one. This kind of came to us as an interest from a solar developer originally, saying that they thought that based on its proximity to the substations and the grid and the sort of the quality of the three-phase power in the area, that it could be developed for utility scale solar. And what utility scale solar, just to give you some idea, the Sand Hill project, right, that exists today that you can go out there and look at, is a combination, is built on about 25 acres total, and is a 4.5 megawatt facility that's a combination of solar and batteries. So what we're saying in this RFP, which was literally hawked from the town of Milton and then redeveloped for this particular purpose. So we're not starting completely from scratch, but looking at something that another municipality recently used, is designed to solicit what kind of a deal, what kind of a proposal could we get. I'm under no illusions that, as I think it was said earlier by maybe more than one person, big projects are tough and they take a long time and they can generate some stress. I think the reason why the Energy Committee feels that this is a worthwhile endeavor, understanding this is a potentially very long-term project, is that looking at all the town-owned parcels that we have today, and I'm just going to leave aside Upper Main Street because, as you guys just said, that doesn't exist until things really start moving. But leaving aside that parcel and leaving aside the landfill that no one has ever wanted to develop for solar for all kinds of environmental reasons, this is the largest and best of the potential parcels that Essex has that you could do solar development on. And our concept, and I think Greg may have alluded to this in one of the question and answer emails, is that we're not seeing this as a way to have it generate electricity that the town itself necessarily purchases. What we're seeing is that this is a way to potentially generate revenue that would go toward recreational and purely would have to be reserved for recreational purposes. So that could be a combination of lease payments, potentially taxes, right? Probably I would assume it would usually come in the form of a pilot or a agreement of some kind, and also potentially as part of the solar development, some trail development through the parcel itself that could connect to Indian Brook Park, so that you'd have both kind of monetary and physical or tangible recreational assets as a result of the whole project. So that's the general idea. I know there were some questions that came in at the last minute. The thing that I'm disappointed to report that I could not get, part of the proposal involves getting a consultant to help the town, including the Energy Committee, figure out what is the best proposal and what's the most reasonable and how do we want to present it. That, incidentally, is something that other towns who've gone through this have done. I was trying to get a quote tonight from one of the potential consultants did not get that information back. So I think that that's something that maybe, depending on how we work it out, we might need to come back to you for. But I don't think it prevents us from at least moving forward with the concept here of working with town staff to actually try to finalize the proposal for the RFP itself.
Board questions, comments? Don?
I think I missed something somewhere along the way. When did the voters decide they were going to put a solar farm up on that property?
Oh, they have not. They have not. I think our concept is, should we solicit actual proposals to see if it's worthwhile to do so?
Before bringing it back to the voters?
Oh, absolutely. Well,
that's what I'm a little confused about.
To get proposals, I think to actually approve something, it's been our understanding that it would need to go through a series of steps, including obtaining the covenant from the owner who granted it to the town.
Correct. I don't believe this would require voter approval unless you wanted to get an advisory vote or something like that. I think this is a select board decision about how you want to use that property, assuming the property owners are willing, or former owners are willing to waive that covenant or amend it. But I don't think this is something that requires voter approval.
Ethan?
Okay. Couple questions. So walk me through the RFP fee for the consultant here, the 3 cents.
Yeah, that's based on the output, and again, we're copying that from Milton and saw that in a couple of other places.
Okay.
That's usually how it works. I think Greg had some concerns about that as well, and so that might be something that's more negotiable.
Okay.
We don't have to include that. We included that because it had been done before, so chances are that's what a consultant is going to want to request.
Okay. So
going through
50% upon receipt of the winning bidder.
What's that?
50% upon receipt of the winning bidder.
Yes.
Do we have money laying around for that?
No, that would have to be approved, and that's why I'm saying that this is a conceptual plan at this point.
Okay. And then 50% after the authorization from the utility. I guess I don't understand how that's written. Upon receipt by the winning bidder of authorization to interconnect from the utility. So once it's connected to
once there's an interconnection agreement with the utility.
With
right?
the utility.
That says, yes, you can connect upon construction. That's when the rest of the fee is paid.
Okay, so the winning bidder would get paid 50%, and then they'd get paid the full amount, the other 50%, before construction even starts.
Well, of authorization to interconnect.
Okay.
So as soon as the utility says.
That answers that question. And then, I saw the New England one. I agree that maybe there's some valuable information in New York, but maybe not.
It's hard to say.
Just
it's
kidding.
It's a different.
But serious.
ISO, right?
It is different area. Okay, so the developable areas in the proposal specifications. So, section 3A.
Yeah.
So my questions here would be the same, similar to what's asked. I don't know who
I am commented.
Those are your comments?
For some reason,
Okay.
it changed Greg into commented.
Well, that's good. I like the comments. They brought up a lot of interesting points because I scanned through most of it, but you tend to look thoroughly at the highlighted ones. So, there's gonna be my question. There was two things from what I read and understood is the is it covenant?
The covenant?
Covenant.
Yep.
Okay, so the recreation, the direct affiliation with recreation, and the idea behind that any money generated from this solar field ever would have to be directly injected to our recreation program.
Yes, or some other recreational benefit that we dream of.
Essex Parks and Rec.
Essex
Period.
Parks and Rec.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it frees up potential money that you fund now with whatever that revenue might be that would go into.
Right. And
Parks and Rec.
and the only reason I bring that up is because the way that we've shifted our rec funding mechanism lately and since my time on the board is that sorry, I'm not going to have all the terminology. I got a million things in my brain today. But the rec is, I can't think of the word, but their own
program
Enterprise
fund.
enterprise fund, right?
Some of it.
Some of it. So there would be, I don't know the right word, but a little bit of confliction in my mind of specifically coming up with a plan, a layout of where does this money go? Because the problem with the enterprise fund is great. You know, it's just like, you know, with other development projects. But once you develop a site and you offer rec programs, that's great. You know, it's great for the community. But when they're an enterprise fund and a lot of these programs are fee based, you know, essentially benefiting the town, but town users would have to pay. So there would be some confliction there if you were paying to a fund that you couldn't have any say where that money goes.
Right.
So the enterprise fund, in my mind, would have to be completely eliminated from the situation. A little bit of, you know, this is my opinion here, but a little bit of complication because then, you know, where does that leave? I would have to look deeper into it myself because this is something that I thought of and read today. Where does that leave the rest of the fund? Is it just capital and will recreation capital suffice the caveat of funding recreation in the town? And I had one more quick thing for okay, so let me just reread that really quick. You can skip me if trying to see why I had a problem with this before. If anybody else has any other comments, I can come back.
Andy?
Solar panels generally have a 20-year useful life, but it's a 30-year contract. Is that a conflict?
My internet tells me 25, go to 30. So we
Okay.
need to make sure that whoever we picks the best panels. But I also think I have more direct experience with communications equipment. And what I notice about that is those are usually 25 to 30-year leases. But boy, are there a lot of changes that take place over the course of that time. And realistically, like so many things, solar panels are going to get more efficient over time. So the likelihood is that at some point along the way, whatever's there today gets swapped out for something else that produces more power.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, right. Because it takes 7 years to offset the carbon from one panel, right? In
Right.
Vermont. So
Right. But maybe that will be in turn reduced. So who knows, right?
but if they're swapping them out every 7 years, we're not saving anybody carbon.
That's true.
That's
Or money.
And so anyway, that's up to the developers issue, I guess. The other question I have is the RFP mentions battery storage, and those can be very loud.
Have you heard the ones? Have you gone over to the ones at Sand Hill?
I have.
They're not very loud. I mean, they're basically like they can have fans almost like an emergency generator, but usually that's muffled in some kind of enclosure. Is what I've seen. They're not. But again, that's something that we could certainly include in the RFP. That any proposal should have the estimated dB levels of whatever equipment is being put there, so that we can understand.
Yeah. Like
Would
I
that
said-
pose any kind of risk to the neighbors?
Like I said, they can be loud. There's probably options that aren't.
Yeah.
But my understanding is that it's the utility commission of the state that approves the plan, not us anyway in the end. So unless we have it stipulated in the contract, we have no control over any of the noise at all, right?
That might be true, although I think here, and this is some, I guess it's some conjecture on my part, but my sense is that the grantor is not going to be so interested in doing this if it's opposed by the town itself. In other words, they're interested in doing this because They said they wanted this property for recreational purposes, and this actually does seem like a way that they can potentially achieve that goal.
Okay. I think something you said earlier clarified one of my other questions about, because our current contract with Sandhill gives us, we pay 88% of the going rate. We're not asking for a specific net metering, and in fact, it actually says that same terms as other third parties. I guess the intent there, as you said, is not to generate electricity for the municipality to use, because then how does recreation gain a benefit from that? I guess that's what that's and
Right.
the
And I also think that, frankly, I think the town can get a better deal based on some of the other net metering agreements that are out there today, and that's an immediate benefit. As it turns out, we've done some research, or we inquired through Green Mountain Power, how much capacity do we have left, or how much potential total credit do we have left? And this was as a result of the sort of severance between town and village, or now town and city. And Green Mountain Power says it's basically 65%. So the town could be shopping today to try to use up that credit and have that impact us today. Whereas this is a longer term project. This could take years.
So I'm not understanding that. What's the 65%?
Yeah, so basically the way that it works is a town has a certain amount, it's 600 kW of credit that they can draw down from using the net metering program. We're only using 35% of that based on the arrangement that we have with Green Lantern at Sand Hill.
Okay, so
it was a higher amount, but now it's much lower as a result of the accounts kind of being separated out. And we have some high usage accounts, particularly the police station, that we could stand to put into a credit program with either Town of Colchester or maybe other developers who are out there who have they're producing the capacity today, and they need to basically find somebody to enter into a net metering agreement with, a credit agreement with.
Okay. It's because the contract we currently have has specific locations that are like this
Specific accounts.
This building, I think most of the pump stations, and a few other locations, and it has a percentage in there that they gain from.
Right.
So if I still don't know how much of our power actually comes from that solar.
How much of the municipality's total?
Right,
I think
because we still pay Green Mountain Power for power as well. So
we think it's about 800 megawatt hours a year. It's been going up since 2021, right? Increasing a little bit each year, but it's at about our estimate is that it's about 800 megawatt hours now.
That's what we purchase from the solar guys. Or is that what we use?
That's what we use.
How much of that comes from the solar? That's the. You don't have to answer that question right now.
Yeah, no, it's a good.
I've been asking that.
We've been trying to answer.
I've been
asking
asking that question for a while. So okay. So anyway, about back to the RFP. The other. I think I hit my other question because so. Your comment about finding other places to get. To use up our credits, would we intentionally not target this new one because there's no way to track that back into recreation?
I think that complicates it, and I also think it's a time thing. In other words, why would we wait on this credit when we could use it now? In other words, why shouldn't we use up all the credit that we can get, because that helps the taxpayers, right, of the town, if we can do that today. Whereas this is a potential means of generating some revenue for the town and some recreational benefits, more than it is kind of a way of producing more electricity that the municipality itself would use.
Right.
Certainly going to be on the grid, on the New England grid, which is a good thing, right? We might be facing 25% tariffs on electricity from Canada pretty soon. So in that sense, it helps. But again, these projects take a long time to
Yeah.
put into operation.
And so our expected revenue is from a lease agreement, which would be whatever the term, a
25 or
30-year,
38.
quarterly, annual, whatever the payment is that would go into some, we would figure out how to inject it into our recreation.
Right.
And potentially some payment in lieu of taxes because we own the property.
Right. And it would be the use of it would potentially change. This is going to be something that we'd have to navigate ultimately, but in theory, it's been done elsewhere. We may try to do it here.
And so those are the two.
Those are the two
sources.
big ones.
Okay, and we're not necessarily looking to get a discount on generated electricity or a percentage of their sales or.
I think though, the way that we've drafted the RFP is that we want to see a suite of benefits. So it's not precluding.
So
them from
they
offering
could offer something.
They could absolutely offer that. And I think we should leave that open.
The trick then might be putting that into recreation, depending on how
Right.
complicated that formula
Exactly.
becomes.
And that part of it, we did include language all through it saying, provided that it fulfill the purpose of the covenant, et cetera.
Okay.
Ethan, did you think of your other?
Yeah, I just had questions about the right to amend or terminate the request for proposals, and that's simply before accepting a bidder on the RFP.
Yeah, and issuing an RFP doesn't mean that
It's
we
a
have to
request.
accept any proposal.
Right.
It's just essentially a call for people to give us proposals.
Okay.
Yeah. Neither this RFP nor any actions taken by the town or the consultant should create any obligation, right?
Right.
So that's the idea is that until there's an actual agreement in place,
Yeah.
all this is to have us put this under consideration.
And then I might have missed it before, but I just caught it when you mentioned it. But we're gonna have to request a land use change on this property for planning for the actually development review board.
No, I don't think we would need that. I think it's more a question of how this works at the assessor's office level, right? Because you've got land that right now is basically non-taxable, and then you're doing an activity on it that is going to generate revenue, but as we've said, and if we can do this consistent with the covenant, it's being used for a very specific purpose that is basically consistent with the non-profit use that it's in the first place.
Yeah.
So maybe it's been a long day.
Oh, yeah, no, that's
totally got in my head all
that.
around
That helps me because a presumption here is that this land was in current use before the gift to the town because of the rights of first refusal, and I'm assuming that there might have been. I don't know if this is bought in or given.
I don't believe they were in the local farm and open lands contract. I don't remember if they were in
the state?
I don't think so.
Okay.
The town owns this land. Sorry, real quick backstory.
Yeah.
The town owns this land because probably about 10 years ago, the Unsworth family was looking to develop this. They had long hoped that the sewer core would be extended, so water and sewer would go onto that property, and they could develop it at a much greater density than they ended up doing. They realized that was highly unlikely to happen, so they wanted to move ahead. They proposed, I think it was a 9-lot subdivision to us. Long story short, they triggered an Act 250 review. Act 250 came back and had some concerns about prime ag soil or wetlands on the property. Act 250 brought up the potential of conserving the land long term. At that point, the Unsworths approached the town, asked if we were interested in accepting the land donation with the restrictions that it be used for conservation and recreation purposes. So that's when we took it over. I don't believe it was in current use or farm and open lands. It was a gift to the town to satisfy Act 250 requirements, essentially.
Yeah.
They ended up, I think, building 10 or 11 lots, mostly along Indian Brook Road.
Okay. Yeah, that's something just to double check on, because that's a 10% penalty on assessed value. But
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's not in current use because
Yeah.
we looked at that, but it's a good
Yeah.
point. The Act 250 point of it is that Act 250 does not have jurisdiction over things that the PUC has jurisdiction over. So that's why this could still work on that front. Again, assuming the PUC would approve it. And I
Perfect.
think they would want to see that, yes, this is being done consistent with the covenants.
And explaining the alphabet soup, PUC is Public Utilities Commission.
Yeah, it might set a precedent for the prime ag land and wetlands that are mapped to be untouched otherwise.
Can I ask what may sound like a weird question, but so you're gonna generate revenue if this goes through, because Parks and Rec is responsible for the Indian Brook Dam. Could you create an Indian Brook Dam fund with this money? Because we're always short.
Possibly, yeah.
It was just a thought. I was because they're responsible.
Yep. So any other questions on the RFP?
So, yeah. Is it ready?
I would say not quite. I would say there's some finishing touches. You saw some of the comments that are in there. I think this is really before you tonight. Do you like the concept of making some land on that property available for solar development? If we go ahead with that, are you comfortable with the idea that any revenue or money would go to support recreation? Those are kind of the two big ones. Bill's been quite patient with me and the Energy Committee as tried to work through some of this stuff. I felt like it was close enough to bring to you to sort of get your take on those two things. If you're comfortable with those two things, I would work with the Energy Committee, staff would work with the Energy Committee to finalize, clean up this RFP, get some of those details worked out, and then issue it and see what we get for responses. Does that answer the question?
It does, yes, thank you. And do we have any plans for more extensive public comment? Because some people don't like solar arrays.
Right. This was the primary one. I'm thinking aloud. I'd hate to go through this whole process and come back to you with a either a draft contract or a partner that we're willing to partner with, and then get the answer that nope, you don't want to do that. So I would say if you want more public input, I would say my recommendation, and I'll see if Will agrees with me or not, would be to come back in 2 weeks, a month, and say we have a cleaned up RFP. We've had time to think about this. Another opportunity for public input, and see where we get or what we get from the public.
And we'll see if we can do it with a consultant as well, and that might also help shed some light. But I do think Greg stated it the right way, that there would be no point in us doing this if it was just a sheer question of nobody likes solar. But I do think that this has a real potential benefit in terms of if it generates some revenue that could be reserved for recreation in the way that we're conceiving, then it just might be worth it. Because nothing else is happening with that land, and there's parts of it that don't that are very well suited to exactly what we're thinking of here.
So procedurally, Greg, do you think it's cleanest to have a vote this evening before firming up language and bringing it back to discuss the final product?
I think if you want to see it again before the RFP is issued, I'd be comfortable taking a consensus to keep working on it with the Energy Committee, staff and the Energy Committee, and bring it back to you when we have it more polished.
Is there any opposition to taking that approach, bringing back more polished language for further discussion, public input at a future meeting?
No objection to that. I just had a question.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
My question was, do you have any comparable projects that you could give an estimate of the potential revenue that you might be looking at?
Yeah, I think we can find that. And Geeta Gannison, who's one of our Energy Committee members, she works in the industry, and so she might have some of the best information, the publicly available information that we can give on that. So we'd be fine to bring that back.
Thank you.
Ethan?
I just kind of have two main things that I will ask Greg to pass along, but can we just double check on land My God, my brain is not working today. The lands, the zoning, I think is it conservation up there? And then if it is, I'm not sure. I know that agriculture and conservation is kind of depends on where you are on the outskirts, but just to make sure that a commercial solar array is in conservation allowances, because I don't believe it is. I think it's only in agriculture, but I could totally be wrong. So just that's my question for you to double check on. And then the second thing would be maybe more of a clear definition and understanding of the covenants of what the true meaning is behind the original purpose, and that may be from the owner of the property, maybe some of their legal with our legal. I don't know how the involvement is currently, but I think that a clear understanding of what requirement we're meeting if we were to.
The only difficulty with that is that it's one of those things where it may be that one proposal doesn't meet what they believe and the other does. And so our thinking about this was we may not actually get there. We can certainly provide more and maybe sort of a statement of purpose from the owner, but it might be hard to figure out if it's consistent. In other words, they'll know it when they see it.
Right. Okay.
And if the owner's passed away and there's no one to talk to about it, you're not gonna be able to answer the covenant then.
It runs with the land, so it would be whoever. And right now, it's actually owned by an LLC, and so the LLC has different members, and I think there's probably a succession plan for those members. Is kind of how I understand it.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Should we ask for public?
Should
we ask for public?
Yeah, I was gonna say, should we ask for public comment or should we wait until final?
You're gonna table it, so you might
Version.
wanna wait.
I think we should ask.
Yeah. Is there any public comment on the proposed RFP? Yes. Yep. Come right up to the table, just so folks online can hear you. Nope, you're fine.
I'm just curious, where is that parcel exactly?
It's let's see if I can.
Yeah, I apologize. I thought I meant to include a map and forgot to do so in the packet, but it's just north of Indian Brook Road. So I'll try to pull it up. It's from Old Stage Road to Indian Brook Park, basically, and on the north side of Indian Brook Road.
North side of Indian Brook Road,
Yep.
okay. So it's behind the current developments that the Unsworth did along the road there?
It's up above Walden Woods. Up higher, is that where you're looking?
I'll figure it out. I'll look at the map again. Thank you.
It's pretty far north. I mean, it is there, but the developable part is quite a bit north of there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Here, I have it almost ready to pull.
Okay. Almost ready.
Say it's west of Towers Road Extension, right?
Yeah.
That's the best way I've been able to explain it to somebody.
It's a very odd shaped parcel,
Right.
so it's going all over the place.
And while Greg is looking for that, are there any other public comments? Not seeing any in the room.
None online.
None online.
No. Okay.
Okay.
At least we can say we asked for public comment.
There we go.
So it's this parcel here. So here's Indian Brook, the reservoir, Indian Brook Road, Old Stage Road, and so, oops.
Oh, it's not worth that.
I'm trying to click on it so you can see the whole thing, but here are the outlines like this, basically.
Do we know which part of it is the acreage that's developable?
The northernmost area is at least the area that originally looked like it did not have wetlands. I'm pretty sure. I'm going a little bit off of memory.
I was remembering more of this area, the eastern portion, but
Oh yeah,
okay. Northeastern, I suppose.
Yeah, northeastern, exactly.
Okay.
But one of the things that a solar company will be able to do is take a look at this and know exactly what can and can't be developed.
And they can put landscaping around it and all that kind of fun stuff too.
Right.
Yeah,
Goats.
yeah. Goats. Yeah, yeah. Goats. All right.
Okay, so with no other public comment, I'm sure we'll be seeing you in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
I crossed off the wrong one. Consider approval final passage of Code of Ethics Investigation and Enforcement Ordinance. We did have some questions, concerns raised about actual, for lack of a better phrase, pointers within the document. Is that something that we would like to investigate and come back to us?
Basically, isn't it just moving? It was like moving a line up in 5A, and it was.
Yeah,
Didn't
it
actually
was-
change the wording, if anything.
It was referring to the now statute. I think when the draft ordinance was adopted, it was still H
Right.
number. So it was updating that VSA reference. It was changing the reference from section 5A to the actual reference. Some spacing issues, which wasn't in the document when it was uploaded, so I'll have to investigate what was happening there. And then the other two pieces that are a little more nebulous are whether we are happy with the prohibited actions that is defined, but it sounds like could be expanded, depending on whether you'd like to investigate that. And the other note I have is Ken's point that the complaint procedure and investigation procedure is really what's necessary to have adopted to meet the intent of the statute. There is other language in there in the model ordinance. If you want to have all of that, we can do that. If you want to narrow it down, I think that was the recommendation, to just the complaint and investigation procedure.
And I do believe that if we do act on this evening, just like any other ordinance, we would be able to update, change, amend, edit going forward. This is a requirement of the state that we have something on the books. This gets us across that hurdle, and it can be changed or edited afterward. So, discussion.
That was gonna be my question. I remembered that was mentioned, but is there a deadline? Was it April 1st?
Yeah, that's what
I believe it's April 1st.
I thought it was.
I've been getting pokes from the state for at least a month now.
I think it's actually March 31st.
March
it was like, yeah, I
31st.
think so.
I remember it being one of those days. But that was gonna be my question: was where are we at? Because this is our last meeting of the month.
So we could pass it with the understanding that it will be revisited as an ordinance on the first meeting in May or April. Sorry. No?
I mean, I think we
Can't make decisions for a new board.
yeah, if we pass it,
All right.
we pass it, and we can reevaluate as we move forward. Andy?
I think the other than the suggested changes to the prohibitive actions or whatever the words were, the other ones are pretty minimal. We wouldn't need to do another public hearing to approve those. Is that?
I'm new, but the way I read the charter is any change, even if it's de
Okay.
minimis, would require another hearing.
That's how we've handled it in the past too.
Okay. All right.
The
So
spacing thing I think would be fine, but changing of words is not.
So personally, I think those changes are fairly trivial, and we could address them at some point if we have another need to change the document in the future. And I think we have other documents. We're allowed to have our own criteria. We have a conflict of interest policy and a communications policy that talk about some of the things that were discussed here, like where we could consider putting those in, and with a lot, we don't have to have public hearings on those, and also I guess we can have those discussions when they come up about free speech rights of select board members. So I'm okay with approving it as proposed tonight. And
Is that a motion?
yeah, I can do that too if we're ready for that.
Because if you want to, I will entertain a motion.
That would be down below here. Yeah, I make a motion that we approve the final passage of the Code of Ethics Investigation and Enforcement Ordinance.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Ethan. Yes.
Discussion. Do we find the date?
Not yet. I was looking.
'Cause that's like a pivotal part of my vote.
Well, either way, you don't have a meeting again till.
Well, right, but I don't know if the date is actually
Oh,
that,
I see what you're
that,
saying.
that I
Okay.
remembered.
Okay.
If it's June
The
or
email I
July.
recall was it needs to happen by the end of March.
That sounds right.
And it's the 17th.
No, I know. I was just hoping we could.
Doesn't sound possible, but it's the 17th.
Dawn could have another last meeting.
I'd hate to vote yes and then have come to find out that it's July 1st and somebody else brings the information back to us that the date
You don't
wasn't.
have to vote yes either. You can vote no.
I can vote no on everything.
Ken, do you have
Nope.
public comment?
We already had public comment.
We did have a public hearing.
I did raise my hand before you. I called the motion, but you didn't see me.
Oh, I
appreciate you letting
apologize.
me, I just want to point out that your only requirement, I'm reading right from the statute, section 1997, each municipality shall adopt by ordinance, rule, or personnel policy procedures for the investigation of complaints that allege a municipal officer has violated the municipal code of ethics and the enforcement in instances of substantial complaints, including methods of enforcement and available remedies. So I would just suggest that if you already have policies, conflict of interest and such, you may already be covered and not need to pass the ordinance as it currently is stated. And that was mischaracterized a little bit. What I had said was the ordinance as it's stated contains most of the text in chapter 60, which seems redundant and potentially will create a conflict if one changes, and or how would they supersede each other? I mean, I don't know, but that was my point. Thanks.
You finding it?
I'm looking through the actual document as enacted. It's not as user-friendly as would be ideal.
I also don't have to hold up the whole meeting if there's general consensus. I'm comfortable in voting.
I mean, we can always.
You're looking for that date.
I just think it's an important piece of information, but that's me and how I formulate my decision.
You have to do it.
Great one. It's not readily accessible.
Yeah, I've been poked 3 times since January by the Ethics Commission. What's that?
It says it right here, effective January 1st, 2025, you're required.
Yeah, I've been poked 3 times since January on it.
Once a month.
Yeah, but it wasn't all in 1 month. Or what was it? What wasn't
The
once
first
per
of
month?
every month.
So we do have.
Yeah, it actually does say January 1st, 2025, so we're
We're late.
2.5 months late.
No, I don't think that's the way that's intended to be read because, for example, we had to appoint an ethics liaison by January 31st. I think they're saying you can't start till January 1st. That's when the law
Oh,
goes
that's when the
into
law
effect.
went into effect. Okay, you're right.
But it is curious, there's no clear deadline on it. They just say make sure it's on your website.
If there isn't any deadline, you should just make it.
Well, there is a motion and it has been seconded, so I will ask for Ethan.
Just really quick
Yep.
clarification. The only changes are for the spacing. There's no changes, just the spacing.
Just the spacing,
And
from what I understand.
instead of saying 5A, they're going to put in the VSA part of it or something.
No, so the changes that if you approve it tonight, final passage, the changes would be what was warned in the public warning, what was in your packet, which was designating the manager as the recipient of any ethics complaints regarding the ethics complaints recipient, and changing that it becomes effective immediately instead of after 60 days. The other items that were brought up tonight,
Or
reference to
not,
statute, the 5A, that would have to be another change, another public hearing.
Okay. Good.
Okay. So all those in favor of approving the ordinance as it was warned in our packet this evening with the spacing issues that didn't actually exist in the document, please signify yes by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Okay. Motion carries 3-2. So I can respond and tell the state that we've done it. And we can change it going forward, as need to hold additional public hearings, or add supporting language in our other policies. Our next business item, discussion about showcase informal hearing, town meeting debrief. I did mention earlier about the charter changes. They were passed by the voters. However, we are starting the process of working with our state delegation to shepherd those through the legislature. Hopefully that will happen this session. Those conversations are happening. Greg or Karen, I'm not sure exactly which one of you
Probably
did it.
Tammy, actually.
Or Tammy.
This is from Tammy.
Did include some feedback, exit polling, so on and so forth in our packet following town meeting. Greg, do you have any additional items to add?
Not really. It's just an opportunity. We've done this the past few years to take a moment and debrief, and anything that you really liked, anything that you didn't like, anything we should do differently or more of next year.
I thought it was interesting in reading some of the comments that people were saying they wanted everything put inside the gym, and yet last year it was too crowded in the gym, and that's why we moved them back into the hallway. So I was like, But I think if you put them all in the gym, they wouldn't be picked up in time for the meeting to start. Or if you were trying to conduct an earlier meeting, like someone said, why is it at 7:30? It would definitely be way too noisy with people visiting the different booths. But I thought that was interesting. But I was very pleased with the sound system, and the video worked so much better than last year.
Yes. Ethan, did you have?
I was just gonna say that we should all take a minute and read the comments for those who commented about the budget. But that was all I had. I was really confused by the poll though, because it says, if you voted no for the budget, tell me why. And 29 people said I voted yes.
Yeah, and they still made, yeah.
That was the option.
No.
That was it, yeah.
Yeah. So in other words, they responded, but
I voted
it wasn't
yes.
applicable because I voted yes.
I think it also was, depending on your question, a different question would pop up. So if you voted yes, it just took you to the next question.
Yes.
If you voted no.
You got a bunch
yeah.
more,
Okay.
yeah.
Because I was just struck by most of the comments in there was about management of funds and increasing the budget, and there was one person who commented and said, I voted yes, but I agree it's too much of an annual increase, especially for the elderly who are living on a limited income. Why isn't our select board look into getting money from other sources besides our tax dollars? What is our federal government for looking pretty? And I was divulging myself in that comment, and I was questioning the process of maybe people understanding how our municipal government works, because I had talked with a lot of people throughout this whole process, and the correlation of individuals who understand the difference between municipal and school tax is very small in this community. And I just think that maybe we start now for next year on, obviously we have a RICO organization and all that good stuff, but a thought in my mind is that we could gain to benefit as a community to have our voters informed in the proper I can't use words tonight, but I'm just going to throw them out there of circumstances of how our individual governments work together, where the voters play a role, where those dollars go, because a lot of people get their tax bill and they don't understand, the capital tax or before the human service funding. And as I read a lot of these responses, I questioned on, somebody commented and said, I did not research or review the information about this article before I voted. And I thought to myself, I'm like, okay. So.
And the full red line version of all of the charter changes were in every voting booth.
Right, I saw that.
So, I mean, folks who, voted absentee may not have had that, but people who did come into the polling place did have that language right in front of them for reference. Andy?
The memo also asked about our budgeting process, and I know we used to do the whole thing in January, and it was hell because we had 8 meetings on top of conducting business. But I found this year in November, every time we came to a meeting, the tax rate, the expected tax rate, was whipsawing back and forth, because it was, frustrating to sit there and think, okay, we got to figure out how to get that number smaller, and suddenly it gets smaller all by itself or gets huge on top of what we're already looking at. And I'm just, and I know we haven't, in some cases, have no control over when information comes to us, and but things like we know when the staff have to make their elections for benefits. And so that was one of the swingers this year. Everybody made their elections and it swung it one way or the other. I don't remember which way it went. I'm just wondering, are we starting too early, or are there things in there that we could do to buffer those big swings? Because it just felt frustrating to me.
Yeah, I sympathize. I didn't love having the numbers change as much as they did. It is a give and a take. On the one hand, the later we start,
right,
the lesser amount of time we have, and the more crunched we are. We also have more certainty on the benefit selections, our passive and our insurance, property and casualty insurance numbers are going to be more final. Our workers' comp, our Green Mountain Transit, some of those external stuff doesn't come in until November, December, January. The past couple of years, I've gotten the manager's budget to you in mid-October. I think we've gotten it to you. I could see, and we've had our workshop in mid-November. I could see bumping it out until early December. But I wouldn't want to go too much later than that unless you want to turn January back into multiple meetings. Yeah. We'll give that some thought. I do think there's probably a little bit of room to push it later into the process, but I wouldn't want to push it too far. And again, finding that how much time do you want to review and give some input versus having the numbers be as dialed in as they're going to be.
Yeah, and the more time you give us to talk, the more we'll talk, too. So I'd be happy with starting in December instead of November, if you can settle some more numbers by then.
Mm-hmm.
Any other input from the board?
I think, where we made those packets up, I think we need to find a better way to get them out to people, because the activities we went to didn't generate a lot of people. I mean, at least mine didn't. I mean, I had 3 people at board games, but I did leave them at the library, the ones I had left, and people were excited to get it. So I think maybe we need to look at where we go with that information, or just set up coffee times to come and talk about it, at various times of the day in various places. And I keep saying we, and I'm very sorry, but anyway.
Well, we, as a town.
As a town, but I'm just saying, I think that, because basketball games, they grab the thing and they, go watch the game. They don't take time to talk
How
to
should
people.
I vote?
Hockey. I don't know about hockey
How
games.
should I
but
vote?
Yeah, all right. How should I? Yeah. Who should I vote for? How should I vote? It's like, this isn't the time or place. But I just think maybe a different. I mean, the information packets were great, but I think we need a different way to get them to the people, so they have time to sit and read it and then discuss it with us, and we can answer. You can answer whatever questions they might have. So,
good.
Just a thought.
Yep.
Is there any opportunity to do more of I think their podcasts like you and Greg did, where you present the budget the one time?
Oh, at Town Meeting TV?
Yeah.
Yeah, they do that once every year, and we post it on our website. I think Town Meeting TV posts it on their website. The coffee chat, which is something that staff has done, we did just one this year. I think we did 2 last year. Again, it's a balance type of thing of trying to reach people, but also when 1, 2, 3 people show up, and we're taking 3, 4, 5 staff to go somewhere and take an hour or two to make ourselves available.
I'm saying
hours we're not doing
make
somewhere else.
better use of your select board too. I mean, we didn't.
Yeah, and I think while it's great to engage people, they're at an event for a specific purpose, and it doesn't typically include talking about the budget. So I think being more meaningful and purposeful as far as how we conduct that engagement, whether it's, 2 of us going and sitting at a coffee shop, or in publicizing that, or having that be the purpose, and
Or have an
more
open house
meaningful.
here and let people come
Yeah.
and talk, just in general, not a huge, formal presentation. Just, do you have questions? Come and meet with a couple of us and talk to us. Yeah.
Yeah. So we can talk about that
That's
for sure.
something.
Yeah, and one other thing, to Kendall's point of, we do videotape a lot, not video anymore, but we record a lot of these things and we do post them to our website. So finding other ways to publicize when those things are posted, when they are available online, that people can watch when they have time is another option.
Ethan?
Oh, I was just gonna mention that the newspaper and then possibly mailing stuff to people, but I know that we just did away with that. So as soon as the legislator approves it, that's
we're
gonna be an
not
option.
we're not required to,
Right.
for our charter, but we still could.
That is a valuable thing to keep on our mind, is that not everybody has the internet, even in our advanced society.
Yep. Agreed. Digital equity is important.
I like the black and white TV story that we got tonight.
Same. Are we okay to move past the info hearing town meeting debrief?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Our next 2 items are executive session. So I'll fast forward to the reading file. I do just want to make note of the policies that are in the packet in preparation for our reorganizational meeting, where we typically we review those and entertain changes to them. Not to say that they can't come back during the year, but it's a great time to level set and make updates to those as needed.
I'm assuming Shannon got copies of all those.
Yes.
Yep.
It's just
Yeah.
And there is the opportunity to make changes of the
Yes.
policies?
Yes. So on that note, I would ask that if folks do have changes that they would like to see, to come prepared with language, to save time during the meeting, so that we have something to actually discuss, rather than conceptual. Words on pages are preferable.
Okay.
Andy?
The other thing we do on that meeting is set the meeting schedule.
Yep.
But if we could get a proposed meeting schedule out earlier than the next packet so that people have a.
We just got a draft of one today.
You did? Okay, great.
Yep, we'll take a look. Karen and I can take a look and then send that out.
Yeah.
Good point, thank you. Board member comments or any?
Yeah, I just had a quick comment about a suggestion from the email that we received from Miss Renner. I think it's a pretty good idea, kind of like we did the charter changes, how we had them printed out at the ballot. Maybe not a bad idea for the human service funding. I know we had it in the annual report, but just something to
Yeah, I
think
think
about for people to have it readily available.
Yeah, I think for that, understanding that we're about to engage in awards, but like there's a lapse in years, so understanding that we aren't about to engage in, making potential awards and scoring applications based on the FY26 budget, because there
So
is
you're
that
right.
lapse, so there's also a timing conversation that needs to happen.
Okay.
In conjunction with, because I would hate to have someone vote against the current proposal based on something that happened a year or more in the past. So I'm not saying,
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
hear
saying
ya.
it's a terrible idea by any means.
Right.
I'm just saying that.
So essentially we need a
having
leap year.
Deeper conversation.
Essentially, we need a leap year for our human service funding to join us in our budgeting year.
Potentially. Yeah.
Okay. I forgot about that. Thank you.
Just a comment about that same subject. Do we have any idea or ever get any feedback from any of the organizations that indicate what Essex residents have received as far as services or whatever?
They were to this year, as part of their application, write how they spent the money on Essex residents. That was what added to the application process. So, because that was one of our questions, is like, we didn't know how it was being spent. You get a thank you for your donation, but we never knew what was happening. So this year's, one of the requirements were that they explain to us how they used the money.
Okay. Will that be available to the public?
No, I'm not sure, because a lot of the information is confidential on it.
Well,
I can ask for you.
Well, I'm just saying, it's taxpayer money. You should be able to ask and find out where your taxpayer money goes.
I
would think,
believe
so.
that we have seen somewhat that level of detail.
I can,
when
yeah,
it comes to
it
the
just, it
select
would
board in
not
the
be anything
past.
real totally specific, like,
Yeah,
like we spent, 20,000 at Mansfield Place, and we spent 20,000 and so and so. It wouldn't be, it would just be
Or this-
for senior services. It wouldn't be a specific.
Or this went to serve 20 individuals,
Yeah,
20
right.
families.
Yeah.
To get a
and that's-
packet that was this thick.
Oh.
That had all the detail in it. I think we just don't include it. I mean, certainly somebody can make a public records request and ask for all of the applications, right?
I think, yeah, and they could make a request, yeah.
Yeah. So it is public, people could ask for it. So. The other thing, I think, Don, isn't there a ranking also in there that
Yeah, there is.
how the number of Essex residents
Right. And that was what
raises
helped us.
people up in the ranking of
Yes, yeah.
fund.
The more Essex people they get help, the higher their ranking is. So.
Okay, cool.
And we had to ask. We actually changed it to as a direct question: is the town of Essex? How do you help the residents of the town of Essex? Because this is Essex taxpayer money, and we want to make sure it's staying in the town of Essex. So yeah, we've tightened up several of the questions this year for hoping to help. But anyway.
Charter amendments submittal, we touched on that a little bit earlier. I did also want to bring attention to the Sand Hill traffic study, the presentation materials from this past Thursday.
That was good. It was
In the
interesting.
packet, just to let everybody know that that information is in there if you did not see it. Any other board member comments?
Greg said this is the time for me to tell you that I have agreed to stay on as a town meeting TV representative, but I would also ask that you continue to advertise the position. And it should be somebody that really likes numbers and finance. Yeah.
Good to know.
And that can meet at noon on the third Thursday of the month, because they've just changed it. So anyway.
Also good information.
But I will, and I do appreciate Greg allowing me to stay on the Human Services Committee for now, because I actually like that work. So thank you. Thank you all for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
With that, I do think that we do have potential action following our executive session, so I do just want to put that out there.
Did you say yes, there is, or not? I'm sorry.
There may be.
Okay.
Given how 7H goes, there is potential action regarding the performance evaluation of the town manager.
Oh, okay.
So there may be some action following executive on that. So with that, I would entertain a motion for executive session.
I have the second one. I don't have the
I
first
got the
one.
first one.
Perfect.
Move that the select board enter into executive session to discuss the appointment or employment or evaluation of a public officer or employee in accordance with 1 VSA Section 313A3 to include the town manager.
Second.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Ethan. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0.
I move that the select board enter executive session to discuss the negotiating or securing of real estate purchase or lease options in accordance with 1 VSA Section 313A2 and to include the town manager and deputy town manager.
Thank you, Don. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ethan. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. We are now in executive session.
Thank you.
Oh. Really? Oh, it says that.
Or at least that one is. Okay, so yeah, are we recording?
We're recording, Logan?
Okay, cool. So we are back out of executive.
Are you ready?
Yes.
I make the motion that the Essex Town Select Board approve the evaluation of the town manager and further authorize the chairman to review this evaluation with the manager.
Thank you, Don. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ethan. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0.
I make the motion, we adjourn.
Oh, Dawn.
No.
Thanks, Dawn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Ethan. Motions to adjourn are non-debatable. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. We are now
Could have
adjourned.
not seconded that.
Hey,
Just-
can you do me a favor?
Thanks, Dawn.